Yet it's starting to. The days are getting longer. It's still cold out. It's still snowing, but it feels like spring is maybe coming. Let's see, is Tracy here? Well, Tracy's going to do our beginner lesson, so we're still waiting for her to show up. In the meantime, while we're waiting for Tracy to start our lesson, does anybody have any questions? Any burning bee questions?
I'll fill the silence. Has anyone thought about putting out yellow jacket traps yet, or do we wait till it's not freezing out?
I just put mine out. I figure as soon as it warms up after this cold snap, which it's going to in a couple days, it's going to get up to 45. Those yellow jacket queens are going to be on the prowl. Yeah. Does everybody here put out yellow jacket traps, that not the kind with food in them, but the kind with pheromones in them? Every yellow jacket that you catch this time of year is a queen. Every yellow jacket you catch this time of year eradicates an entire nest of yellow jackets that might harass your hives. So they're on Amazon. They're not expensive. Late February, early March is the time to hang them out. And I know as soon as I started hanging them, I noticed a definite reduction in the number of yellow jackets that were kind of hovering around my hives.
Would you be able to post an Amazon link to those traps in the chat?
Yeah, let me, and what I do is I bought them, and then every year you can just buy the pheromone refills, which is less expensive.
There's the pheromone refills. I don't know if my video is going to show that very well, but I bought a 10-pack of these. Rescue is the brand that there's got to be a better way to get the light here. Is that visible?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, my second year as a beekeeper, 2 out of my 3 hives were devastated by yellow jackets, and I have been on a mission to destroy the little monsters ever since.
Yeah. Thank you, Magali. I was just going to do that and I got sidetracked. So I'm going to go ahead and put we're checking on Tracy to see where she is. She's usually a very punctual person, so I hope everything's okay. So I just put into chat, oh, it's a very long link, sorry, a link to the yellow jacket traps.
How many traps would you recommend putting around the yard?
I live on about an acre and I put out 2 of them. So I kind of put one on either side of my hives. They're not very expensive. You can easily get 2 of them and hang them out. And then you can either take them in around May, or you can, if you're like me, you don't bother, you just leave it out on the tree, and then every year you go out and just put a new pheromone packet in it. They do like to be kind of in, where you would find a yellow jacket nest, kind of in the woods, in the ground, about a couple feet up, 3 to 4 feet up off the ground, not super high. And I put them relatively close to the bees because I feel like they come sniffing around my hive and decide that it's a good spot to build a nest, right?
Gotcha. Thanks.
Mhm. Okay. Well, you know what?
Questions.
Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
got some questions about feeding pollen sub. Is it too early to get started at that with the weather the way it is?
There's a lot of controversy about when to feed pollen sub. So this is part of the art of beekeeping rather than the science of beekeeping, although I've read some scientific articles that I try and back my opinions up with. So, but what I'm going to give you is how I do it, and you're going to hear other opinions. I start giving them pollen sub around Valentine's Day. They actually start brooding up in January, right around solstice in January. The queen starts laying her first patch of brood. And what happens is it's actually the worker bees that eat the pollen sub. And they eat that and they digest it and turn it into the vitellogenin, or the fat that they use to then feed the queen and all of the baby brood that is beginning to hatch out. So it's really beneficial. They've done studies and have found that when you give your bees pollen substitute, then they build up a lot faster in the spring. Now, one thing that you'll hear sometimes is that you shouldn't give them pollen sub in the winter because it stays in their gut and they can't go out and do elimination flights. The sugar burns through really clean. The pollen makes them poop, right? They get a little poop buildup from pollen. And I don't think that's really as much of an issue in the Northwest. We have enough days that every couple weeks they have a chance to go out and fly. If you live in really, really cold areas where the bees can't ever get out to fly, then that would be good advice there. And that's kind of where sometimes beekeeping is regional.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep. So I think that since
I've also got a question about splits. I know I'm very excited going into the spring here. I know that it's way too early to start thinking about making a split, but I just want to be like ready for it. When should I start looking for that? Is there a temperature that I should be ready for where I can start getting into the hive and looking for queen cells and things like that?
Yeah, the first thing you want to watch for is the drones. So as soon as the bees make drones, and as soon as they start making drones, then you know if they're crowded, then the next thing they're going to do is make queen cells. They make queen cells, what you hear is when they're crowded, but it's not, sometimes it's a little bit of a physical space, but it's also a pheromone crowding. So when there's a whole lot of uncapped brood building up, the queen's building up all this brood, especially with carniolans, they put out all this pheromone and the bees go, oh my gosh, we have so many bees coming. We need to swarm and make another home. And also if there's a lot of honey there, then they know that they can swarm. This is actually what our speaker is going to talk about tonight. So I'm not going to step on his toes and talk about swarming, because you're asking about splits is a way to control swarming. But you do want to make sure during swarm season, as soon as you start seeing those drone cells, to make sure to watch for swarms. I'm sorry, I answered the wrong question. Splits, you want to do as a prevention to swarms. And what you need to have for a split is at least 2 nukes. So you've got to have, a couple frames of brood and a couple frames of food and a frame of drawn wax or undrawn wax. So you can basically make 2 nukes. That would be the smallest size of split you want to do. If you don't have enough bees to make 2 nukes, then they're too small to split. And if you can have them make their own queen, but we have such a short summer here. We only have, a very few weeks of summer. We have a super short summer. So it takes a month for them to make a queen and get her mated. And that's like 25% of our entire summer, having that hive make 1 queen. So if you really want to get maximum productivity out of your splits, then you can buy a queen and they are immediately productive.
Hey Kathy, you got any queens?
Not yet. It's like really cold where I am, and I can't wait to see some eggs in the drone cells to feel like spring has started, but not yet. So everything is really just dependent on weather, and most people are not breeding queens until maybe into the end of April, May. So nukes come out first, and then after you get done with those, then you spend time breeding queens. So, if you get a queen, you're going to have to get one via online someplace, California.
Got it. And then I've got one more kind of like 101, 201 level question here, which is, when is a good time to do a Varroa treatment? I know that you want to get in there before they've got a ton of brood. You've just said that they've probably already got some brood started, but it's been too cold to get in there with like the Apivar, the Apicard, or to do the oxalic drip. So what would you recommend on that front?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
I always say, just as a rule of thumb, May and August. They usually haven't built up too much brood. You kind of, to hit them with chemicals right when they're starting, it can be a little detrimental. So I like to see that the larvae have been capped off, are pupa now, and are on the way to being hatched. And then I feel a little bit safer about doing a treatment in the spring. And I like Apigard in August after you pull the blackberry flow off, because you use that without any honey on the hive. And if you've got a hive that's just terribly bad and you can't wait, pull all the honey off of it, put it on another hive and treat the bad hive, because it'll spread it throughout your apiary. And if you catch swarms, treat your swarms.
Yep. Yep, you can do a dribble or a vapor or any number of things on your swarm, but oxalic acid is going to be one of your best bets for swarms, because there's no capped brood. There's no brood at all. So every mite is on the bees. So you could literally dribble it on there, wait a while for them to rub against each other, and spread that oxalic acid around. And that's a great way to treat your bees, your swarms. So this is like super unusual. Tracy has never. Oh, you're going to ask another. Go ahead, Keeks. I mean, this is good. It's everybody's learning something from your questions.
I think that's all the questions I've got. I did see that Michael's got one about queen breeding, which, like, over the winter I got into a lot of queen breeding YouTubes, and everybody is like, "Oh, it's such an easy, fun thing to do. That's going to save you so much money." And then I was immediately like, "Holy smokes, this is way outside of my skill set." So, anybody want to say anything on breeding queens?
Well, it's not something we can cover in 10 minutes. It is a very, very complicated topic, and it's not as easy as they say it is. Well, it can be, but it does take a lot of practice. So I think that would be a good topic for a future class. So we'll look into that. And the other thing I will try and do is maybe I will look up some resources for good queen breeding YouTube videos, and maybe Kathy could send me a couple if she knows of some, and then we'll post those in the newsletter. That would be good. Okay. Okay, so I'm worried about Tracy. I hope she's okay.
I know, me too, because I've been texting her, I've been calling her, and I've called her all day and not reached her. So,
okay.
Do you want me to talk about something?
No, let's go ahead and do the club announcements, and then okay. we can either go right into the talk, or we can spend another 15 minutes asking, chatting about questions, because I think it's always really beneficial to just have these roundtable talks too. Absolutely. So welcome to PSBA meeting. I'm so glad you're here. This is really, really the best place to learn about bees. So we have a whole bunch of things going on this year. And the first thing I want to talk about is education. That's what we're here for. That is our mission, to make sure that you learn how to be the best beekeeper that you can be. And with that, we have a new instructor. We've got Magali, which right now says PSBA board. She is on her way close to being a master beekeeper. And she's going to teach beginning beekeeping. So we've taught 2 beginning beekeeping classes already. If you missed those and you still want to take one, Magali is very, very informative and a great teacher. The class, it will be March 18th and 19th. So that's a Saturday and Sunday from 8:30 to 12:30. And it will be on the website soon. It's not quite there to sign up yet, but within a couple days, you should see those signups there. So go ahead and jump in and sign up for those. We have actually so far had 57 people of our members, 57 members go through and take beginning beekeeping classes this year. So that is a great turnout. It's one of the best things you can do to learn about bees. It's 8 hours of listening and learning, but it's really a great foundation. And it teaches you kind of what questions to ask, even if you don't absorb it and learn it all the first time through. You heard it, and then you know kind of the right questions or the right things to Google. And I also, for education, I want to send a huge thank you out to Kathy Cox and Magali. They are our MCs for all of these classes. So Magali is our wizard of everything technology, and she manages the technology portions of the class and answers chat questions. And Kathy is like typing furiously the entire time during these classes, answering everybody's questions. And so you just have a really great resource with all those people. So if you haven't taken a class yet, I really recommend you do. The next thing I want to talk about is volunteers. We are an all volunteer organization, and we really need people to help, and it's fun to step up and help. We have a great community here. We know each other, especially after COVID. It is such a great way to get connected and know people is to volunteer and work on something like this with them. So each month we're going to kind of have a little bit of a volunteer highlight of things that we're looking for help with. Let's see. So Gerardo, I'm going to throw it to you if you're ready. Gerardo has a little presentation on volunteers that he's looking for right now. And Gerardo's sharing is enabled, so you can do a screen share.
Thank you, Dawn. Let me share my screen then. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. I spent the next few minutes to introduce the Puget Sound Beekeepers Association Community Outreach Program, formerly known as the Teach the Teacher. We changed name and we changed how the program works. So I think that is essential for us to establish a positive relationship with our community, address the fear of bees, and explain how to build a pollinator-friendly garden. The goal of the program is to reach out to the communities, could be visiting your local schools, the Girl Scouts, or the local senior center, to share our knowledge and experience with bees. In this way, we support PSBA mission, that is to support bees, beekeepers, and the community. So if we engage with the community and build a positive experience, they will help us supporting bees, and they will support us as beekeepers. So it's a win-win-win situation. There are 2 prerequisites to be volunteers with the program. The first one is to be a Puget Sound Beekeepers Association member in good standing. And the second is to attend a brief online training that covers 2 aspects. The first is how the program is organized, so how you should expect to engage with us. And second, legal aspects of representing a nonprofit organization. There are some very important aspects to be considered, and we want everybody to be aware of them. We have 2 sessions available for the training. You can use the QR code on your screen or the hyperlink below to apply. The content of the 2 sessions is exactly the same. So please use the form to choose the time that is more convenient for you. And I want to briefly touch on my experience with this program. This is a picture from a recent event I presented at the Blackwell Elementary School that is like within walking distance of my house. The conversation with the students was very interesting. At the beginning, most of them were scared of bees, but after my presentation, that is mostly pictures of my garden, and observing the bees that I brought in an observation hive at the school, they became much more relaxed around bees. I've been giving this presentation for 7 years now, and each year there are like 100 students, all the 5 first graders. So pretty much by now, all the kids in the community know who I am and love bees. I want to point out that the training will not cover details about bees or other pollinators. We trust your knowledge and experience to present the appropriate material and answer questions. We are preparing some basic material that you can leverage, like slides or some large pictures. And you can borrow an observation hive from PSBA if needed to bring live bees on site. Any questions?
Bill, go ahead.
The second date was for the training was on March 9th. What time was that? Oh, thank you. Now, oh, okay, because there's a board
And
meeting.
both of them are in the form, so you can select in the form.
Could you repeat that?
Both those dates are in the form. If you use that QR code or that hyperlink
I got you.
to apply, you can just select the one you prefer, and you will receive an invitation via email.
Okay.
I have
And
a
I also
question.
put a, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, when people are hoping for material, are we providing that resource for people to have information to present when they go out to teach?
We will prepare some basic material, but each audience has different expectations. For example, in schools, the biology teacher already taught everything about pollination. So what students are interested in is, what does a beekeeper do? May I see a bee? What kind of tools do you use? What does frame look like? May I smell wax? So bringing stuff is what engages the audience the best. If you go to the senior center, then you may be a bit more focused on the life cycle of honeybees and more technical details. And in general, depending on the questions, you can bring up all sorts of things. For example, where native bee nest? What colors are native bees? What size? All these questions are very interesting. And in order to engage with the community, you don't have to know everything. You don't have to be an entomologist or a very experienced beekeeper. It's fine to say, I don't know. And then follow up with, I'll find out and get back to you. And PSBA is a huge community, and there are very experienced people. Kathy is one of those. And so if you have questions from your audience that you cannot answer, just come back to us and we'll help you out.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Gerardo, I'll get with you later, but I'm not doing teaching anymore. It's just kind of all too much for me to load all that stuff and haul it places. But I have got some really great material for teaching, and I have no problems loaning it out to students. I have great big laminated pictures of all different types of bees doing different types of things. I have a cute little mini hive that the kids can play in. I have lots of little stuffed bees. If you're doing preschools, it kind of keeps them from talking to each other and stuff like that. They play with bees and pay attention to you. So I'm happy to loan any of that stuff out, and I'll get a list to you of what I've got, Gerardo.
Thank you very much. I actually sent you an email 10 days ago. If you could reply
I
to
know you
that, we
did.
can coordinate.
I know
Thank
you
you,
did,
Kathy.
and I'm so delinquent with my move. I am
Oh,
so sorry.
don't
Forgive
worry.
me, forgive me, forgive me.
Thanks for helping, Kathy. Any other questions or comments?
You know, Gerardo, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. I don't know, is your mic up as high as it'll go?
Maybe, or maybe it's Zoom. I don't know.
Okay, we'll
I'll
blame it
try
on
to
Zoom.
speak louder. Any more questions or comments? Thank you, everybody, for your interest then.
Thank you, Gerardo. And it is really fun to go out and talk to the community about bees. They absolutely love it. Senior centers, schools, daycare centers. It's really fun. And if you have even 1 year of beekeeping under your belt, you know so much more than just about anybody else in the public. So don't feel intimidated like you have to know everything, because you don't. And actually the questions that people tend to ask are really simple. Does the queen rule the hive? You know, things like that, you know. So it's really, really fun to do. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the apiary. We've got the apiary getting ready to open in the spring. We're really excited to offer hands-on beekeeping mentoring in the apiary. It's really hard to find mentoring in our modern world, and coming out to the apiary is a great way to stand next to somebody, watch them pull out a frame, talk about what they see on the frame, and you pull out a frame and kind of, you know, then you practice and do it. It's really, really, really great practice. Our apiary is in Volunteer Park near the Wisteria building, that building that's all covered with wisteria. And it's an absolutely adorable apiary. There's going to be work schedules, work parties there, and they call them work parties. I think of them more as mentoring parties. Really, it's not work, it's fun, because we all love to talk about bees, right? Everybody around us gets tired of hearing us talk about bees. Here you can go to a place and actually talk about bees with everybody, and it's a lot of fun. And that's where the mentoring is. It's kind of a joint project. If you know something, then you can help mentor someone, and you learn something yourself too. So I really encourage you to go out to the apiary. Not all clubs have apiaries, so we're really lucky to have that resource. Now I want to talk a little bit about the outreach. So one of our missions is to educate everybody and make better beekeepers, but we also reach out to the community. So Gerardo's project going out with educational materials for schools and senior centers. We also do seeds for bees, which is seed packets that we can give away. So if you go out and help Gerardo, ask for a handful of seed packets, and you can take those and hand those out to the schools. And then the kids can sprinkle these wildflower seeds around, and it's really good for the pollinators. There will be some street fairs this year, not as many as there was before COVID, but we'll be looking for some folks to help out at street fairs. That's always a lot of fun. We'll have honey sales. We like to make sure that people have access to good local honey. We get requests for speakers, so it's not uncommon to have Rotary or other civic clubs send us a note and say, hey, we need a speaker, and we'll ask for someone to go out and talk about bees. If you ever get asked to do a presentation on pollinators and bees and you don't have a presentation, go ahead and ask us on the board. We've all got access to or have made different types of presentations that you are more than welcome to take and use to spread education. And then the other thing that we do that's outreach is we've got a swarm list. Anytime somebody gets a swarm in their yard, or the fire department, they call the fire department, they call us, they call their local bee club, and ask someone to come out and pick up that swarm. So we have a swarm list that's on the website and in the newsletter that you can sign up to be on the swarm list. What I also do is I send out notes just on my community network. I'll find a picture of a swarm on the internet and I'll paste it, and I'll say, if you see something like this, call me. And what happens is I get about 20 calls total, and one of them is actual honeybees. So most people think that anything that's buzzing in a group is a swarm. But it's a really good opportunity to educate the public, because oftentimes it's yellow jackets, and you can help them learn how to deal with their yellow jackets. And if you ever get a call like that and you're not sure, go ahead and call me. I can help you tell them what to do about yellow jackets. It's bumblebees. Bumblebees are seasonal. If you leave them alone, they'll be gone by fall. And it's a really good opportunity to educate the public and get them to really like pollinators. We have some resources. I'm going to copy them out here. I'm going to put them into the chat that are available to you. And so you can go ahead and click on these links out of chat, or you can copy them, whichever you'd like. There we go. They're all there. So the first one I want to talk about is membership. So you can become a member if you're not a member already by clicking on that link, or if you know someone else that's interested in keeping bees, they can be a member. And even if they just like pollinators and don't want to actually keep bees, we're a nonprofit, and it's like a donation almost if they're joining and not keeping bees. And we appreciate every member that we have. The next link is to neighborhood captains. I feel like the neighborhood captains are the most underutilized resource we have. A neighborhood captain, renamed, is a mentor. It is your local mentor. It's the person who lives closest to you, who can answer questions for you. And these are people that volunteered and put their name forward. If people have questions, I'd be happy to help. And you can either email or text or call, whichever works for them and you. And I know I get all kinds of questions by text, and I always take time to answer them. So make sure that you're getting in touch with your neighborhood captain. They're not going to come to your house and help you inspect your hive, but if you take pictures of your frame of what's going on in your hive, they can often help you from pictures. So a couple of years ago, I had a gal who had queen cells. She didn't know what to do with them. And so she sent me pictures of just about every frame in there, but primarily you need to see the queen cells. And so from that, we were able to help her make a new queen, and she successfully got her bees to make a new queen. And we were able to do it remotely just by texting. It was really useful. The next link is to the state hive registration and civil liability protection through the state of Washington. Well, first off, it's the law to register your hives. Every one of us that has beehives has to register them. And it only costs like $5 or $10, and you can do it online. They used to make you get a piece of paper in the mail and fill it out and send it back. You might still have to mail it in electronically, but they're slowly coming up to the modern day and making it a little bit easier. But when you register your hives, you also receive protection from civil liability through the state. So if your neighbor thinks that your bees stung them or got into their swimming pool or whatever the issue is, the state can help you with civil liability. You don't just have to rely on your homeowners. So it's really, really a good thing to register your hives every year. Also on here is the swarm list application that I mentioned. So you can go in, I think you have to have 1 year of beekeeping experience in order to be on the swarm list. And then a fun thing is Washington State is trying to get our own beekeeping license plate. Oregon has one, Georgia has one. All these states have these really cool license plates. And if you sign this petition, we just need 3,500 signatures, and they will produce a license plate for Washington State. Now, when you sign it, it says, I intend to buy a license plate. That doesn't mean you will. You are in no way obligated to buy a license plate, but go ahead and sign it. And I think that there will be lots of people outside of the clubs who also would love to have a pollinator. I'm hoping they put like some honeycomb and maybe a little drip of honey, something, something like that on. That'd be a really good license plate. And then the last link on there is our bee vendors. If you have not gotten your bees yet, you don't know where you're getting your bees from, we have gone through and vetted a certain number of providers that will have available for you packages and nukes. So I really recommend that you call these guys instead of just like going through Man Lake or something and having them mail you some bees. And now, did we have one of our bee vendors here today that wanted to talk to us for a few minutes?
I saw Dave here.
Yeah, I'm here, Dawn. I can talk for a couple minutes about what I offer.
That would be great. I think someone mentioned that you wanted to talk for a few minutes today, and we definitely have time.
I have visuals, just 10 slides. Can I share my screen?
Sure. Yep, share is enabled.
Okay.
Okay. I hope I didn't put you on the spot.
Well, I'm trying to pull. I'm not on the spot. I'm trying to pull up what I want to share.
There you go.
Yeah, but then once it's shared, how can I get that in slideshow mode? I'm a little confused about that.
Dave,
I
you can
think
do
you
that
have-
by clicking to the right. When you go to the bottom, you see that you have 4 little icons next to
Yeah.
a 50%. The
Okay.
one. There
Okay,
you
can
go.
everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm one of the vendors that Don was referring to. My name is Dave Schiefelbein. My company is Elite Honey and Bee. The website is there. It's just elitehoneyandbee.com, all spelled out. We sell packages and nukes and also mated queens mid-April and throughout the season. So people thinking about doing splits early on, if you want to order a queen and have it in town in mid-April, we can accommodate that. The first thing I just want to talk about is we do stand behind all the products that we sell, and that really the basis of that is our queens. If there is a problem early on with our queens on any of the offerings on packages or nukes, we offer a replacement warranty. And we always try to work with you, even if it's later in the season, we try to analyze what the issue may or may not be. So we offer, as I said, packages. We have 3 races: Caucasian, New World, Carniolan. The price there, including tax, is $198. And if you bring the box back to us, which we hope you will, you get $4 back on that. Our delivery dates, as they are set up now, and this is from our breeder, we have 2. Sunday, April 16th and Sunday, April 30th, both in Medina, which is kind of a suburb of Bellevue. We hope that is the case. I'm going to address California weather in just a minute here. Also, we have mated queens. Again, the same 3 races, $55 includes tax, same delivery dates. Basically, from April 16th on, we have queens available for anyone that wants them. And then we do maintain a queen bank throughout this season as well, pretty much from April through October. And then we have nukes available also again, the same 3 races, $295, that includes tax. Again, if you return the box to us, if you recycle it with us, we give you $20 back. So that drops the price to $275 if you bring that box back. Same delivery dates in Bellevue. Last month, we talked a little bit about the advantages of getting a nuke, and I just want to spend a second talking about that. The nucleus hive accelerates the growth of your new colony way over the possibilities that a package can give you. And that's because of the existing brood that comes with the nuke. It will expand on a daily basis from day 1. And the reason that's important for new people perhaps to know is when you get a package, it has no brood. And frequently package buyers sometimes don't even have any drawn comb. So when you get a nuke with drawn comb, with a laying accepted queen, you automatically get at least 2 to 3 week jump for your colony to grow as opposed to packages. I always try to give the caution to people that some people will sell nukes and call it a nuke just because it's in a 5-frame box. And PSBA has done a good job in sort of sussing that out. You know, you don't really, or it would not be advantageous, I don't believe, to buy a 5-frame nuke that has a cage queen in it and expect it to do as well as, for example, one of the nukes that I sell, or another vendor here, Peter, sells the same type of nuke. Those have been set up in the field prior to us even going to California to pick up those nukes. And they have an accepted queen and they're thriving. So we say that we professionally grade and pattern those nukes. And what that means is myself and the 2 other people that I work with on my California trips, we actually go out into the field and we hand inspect every single frame and every single nuke that we bring back to Seattle. We are looking for a good brood pattern. We're making sure that we don't see any obvious signs of disease, and we're making sure that there are resources like honey and pollen and a well-laying queen. And then and only then do we accept that nuke and bring it back with us. So the majority of my time when I go to California is not just picking up bees, it's spending time out in the field checking on the bees that we're going to bring back. And this is why I'm talking a little bit about nukes right now. The photo on the left is more or less typical weather in May or late April when we are in California. It is warm, and that's when we are bringing bees back to you folks here in Seattle. What's happening in California right now is the picture on the right. That is an almond grove in the Orland area 4 or 5 days ago. They are suffering through a very cold early spring right now, and that will definitely affect the almond industry. It's not really going to kill the bees. The bees can handle that just fine. I do think there's not going to be as many almonds on the market this year as other years. I can't believe that things aren't just stunted at the moment. But the way that affects us up here in Seattle is it's quite possible that any of us supplying packages or nukes might be delayed in what we can bring back here. It's just too early right now and too cold in the Central Valley for any queen breeding to happen. So it's just one more argument for getting a nuke as opposed to a package, because I sort of think our season is going to be a little bit behind based on what's happening in California. So one way to kind of catch back up on that is to choose a nuke over a package, just because you've got something that's up and running already. Okay, again, my name is Dave, and the company is Elite Honey and Bee. Thank you.
And I want to add in just one more positive thing about buying nukes is they come with wax, and wax is huge. In fact, we're going to have a speaker come later in the year, and her entire topic is wax is gold. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we overwinter in 2 double deeps. So that means if you're in 8s, you have to have 16 frames, or if you're in 10s, you have to have 20 frames of drawn wax. It doesn't do any good to put undrawn frames in there. They can't keep it warm. They can't put babies in it. They can't store food in it. So the more frames of wax that you can get them to draw before the blackberry flow, the better chance your bees will have of surviving the winter. And so if you buy a nuke from Dave or one of our other vendors, you automatically, hopefully, get 5 frames of drawn wax. Sometimes if it's an undrawn frame, you kind of go, dang, I really wanted to get wax in there. But ideally you should have 4 to 5 frames, which is 20 to 25% of what you need for the whole year. So that's the best thing about it. And for my first couple of years, I bought nukes every year until I had enough wax, and then I felt okay to buy packages.
So any nukes that anyone is purchasing from Elite Honey and Bee will have 5 drawn frames on them.
That's a quality vendor. Thank you, Dave. Okay, so we are about 15 minutes ahead of time. We're still worrying about we're still worrying about Tracy, who has never not shown up. Oh my gosh, so we're all going to be fretting. I'm wondering, Charlie, you're here. Are you ready? Do you want to give me a thumbs up if you're okay to present? And I'll introduce you. Okay, so today we have with us Charlie Vanden Heuvel. I hope I said that right. Charlie is a master beekeeper out of Oregon. Oregon has a master beekeeping program that's really well thought of, and he's a master beekeeper there. He started beekeeping by throwing himself feet first into as many beekeeping activities as he could. He didn't kind of dip a toe in, he jumped in, joined multiple clubs, got as much experience with classes and mentoring as he could, and kind of took the fast track to being a really good beekeeper. Currently, he mentors for Columbia Gorge, and he's also teaches the apprentice program at Columbia Gorge also. And he's going to come and talk to us. He's here today to talk to us about swarms. It's a little early in the season for swarms, but again, as soon as we start seeing those drones, we need to start thinking and planning for them. So let's welcome Charlie. Thank you, Charles, for being here.
You're more than welcome. Let's see. Oh, look at that. This is so awesome. Okay, and I think we're up. So yeah, we're going to talk about swarms, but we're going to talk about a lot more than just the swarms. We're talking about some things that are kind of interrelated with swarms. So it's really the triggers, the behaviors, and kind of the whole scenario, how the thing gets set up. So hopefully that'll be enlightening to you guys. If you're a new beekeeper, hopefully all the old beekeepers know what the life cycle of a honeybee is. It's imperative for you guys to memorize the life cycle. You know, how many days is the egg there? It's 3 days. How many days is the larva there? When are the cells capped? Every time you go into a hive, if you know these things, it's easy for you then to sort out what happens after that. But when it comes to swarms, it's going to be critical for you to know these kind of things. I've added in a couple of frames here. This is kind of a bonus. I'm not going to charge you guys anymore, but I wanted to talk about a typical brood frame. You can see on here some cap cells, worker cells. If you look down towards the lower left side, there's some drone capped cells there. They're popcorned up from the face of the frame. You can see some honey over on the left there and on the right. This is a very classic brood frame because it's got all the elements that it needs to have on there. It's got some honey, it's got some pollen, and that allows the nurse bees to grab some of that stuff and feed to the larva. If your brood frame's not looking like that, then you may have a problem. All right, so as I said, it's critical to have nutrition. The larva between day four after the queen has laid an egg until day 9 or so, when that cell gets capped, that larva gets fed 10,000 times, about once every 2 seconds. That's a lot of feeding. It literally is just fattening up that little grub. And they fatten it with some pollen, with some nectar or honey, and their mandibular enzymes. And so they're voraciously feeding these guys. So you really need to look for a little pool of liquid, which I'm going to show you in just a second in the open brood. That's one of the things. So here we have some cells. Excuse me, you can see the larva on the left of different ages, but you can see that liquid's in there. If that liquid's not there, then your hive has a problem. It doesn't have enough nectar coming in, maybe there's no nectar available in the environment, there's not enough pollen, something is going wrong, and you need to look for those things. All right, let's get to the root of our issue here. So swarms are absolutely fascinating. If you've not seen a swarm before, you can stand in the middle of it and the bees will just be flying around you, okay? It's just, it's an amazing sight to see. And fortunately, I was able to get some videos of that. The swarm is an annual cycle of reproduction. When we think of reproduction on the human level, we're thinking about, being pregnant and having babies, and that's how we reproduce our human lot. But when we come to honeybees, even though the queen is laying all these eggs every day, we don't see that as true reproduction. All they're doing is replacing the bees that are dying off within the hive. The true reproduction is when we split the hives. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about a feral hive, like out in the Arnott Forest that Seeley loves, or we're talking about in our backyard in our own hive boxes. That hive is trying to replicate itself to continue the species, because somewhere in their little pea-sized brain, they know that some of the hives are going to not survive, and so they need to keep the strength of the global population up. It is a very natural phenomenon. It's the way of producing, it's a division of the hive, and it is an asexual form. So the colony does divide in half. And if you're a brand new beekeeper, it's probably the most exciting thing that you'll come upon. If you're an old beekeeper, then you'll kind of amble out there very calmly and go, wow, look, there's a swarm, and you'll kind of handle it. But for the new beekeeper, it's extremely exciting. A lot of new beekeepers are a little bit intimidated by it all, but swarms are the easiest thing in the world. They're very calm and cool and easy to take care of. The process of swarming really starts with queen cells. And so we need to understand that there's 3 different types of queen cells. So first off, let's segment these between a queen cell and a queen cup. So pictured here, we have queen cells. They're sticking out the bottom of the frame. We're actually looking at the bottom board of the frame there, and we see these cells hanging down, and they have larvae inside. So those are queen cells. They're probably going to get capped here in a day or two, looking at the size of the larva. Once they get capped, of course, then it's not going to be very many days before a queen's going to hatch out of there. If it's a cup, and worker bees develop these cups, and sometimes they never get populated by the queen laying an egg in it, and sometimes they do. So I'm old and decrepit. I don't mind admitting that right here publicly. And so I use my phone to take pictures of that cell, and then I can look at it, enlarge it, and be able to see whether there is actually an egg or a larva in there. When you look at a regular brood frame and you look at the larva, like when it's 4 days old, just right as soon as it's hatched from an egg into a larva, you can barely see that little larva. So don't be embarrassed to take some pictures. I take lots of pictures when I go in and explore hives. Make sure you turn your flash on, because inside the cell is dark, and kind of practice it, and you'll just get better and better, and you'll be pretty excited. So as I said, there's 3 types of queen cells, and they're all on the face of the frame. So we have emergency, we have supersedure, and then we also have swarm cells. So when we look at the frame, like we're looking at here on the right side of this slide, you will see some cells up towards the top, the upper third of that frame. And if you look at these closely, you're going to see a little indentation of the cells that kind of surround that queen cell. And this is an indicator that this happens to be emergency queen cell. So for whatever reason, the queen has died. She's just not there. She's not producing her pheromone. And so what the workers do is they go in and they pull wax from the adjoining cells to cover what is considered to be a viable egg. So they actually have identified that this is a better egg than the cell next to it. And so they kind of search and pick. And so you'll see 2 or 3 emergency queen cells here. And what is, of course, what those workers are hoping is that queen will mature and emerge from one of those cells and then go out and get mated, and life will go on as they know it. So that's the emergency cell. Then we have the supersedure cell. This, as you can look at these, the cells are not pulled to make up the cell structure, the queen cell structure. They're just literally laying on top of it. It's like a peanut shell laying on top of the face of the frame. What has happened here is that the queen's pheromone has diminished to the point that they don't recognize she's there, and she's old, and so we need to replace her. And so it's just a natural process. They say, okay, we're going to go ahead and replace her. And sometimes she'll stay in the hive, and sometimes she won't. It kind of depends on how they're feeling about her. All right. Then what we really need to look at is the swarm cells. So in the Langstroth hive, the swarm cells are always at the bottom of the frame, and you can see them extending down a little bit. That's where we want to look for those. When you are doing a hive inspection on a Langstroth hive, what really is helpful is if you will take the second box and tilt it back. Don't remove any frames, just tilt it back and look underneath those frames so that you're looking up at this frame to see if these cells are there. And if they are, then you can do something about it. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you started inspecting these frames by pulling the frames out, you have the possibility of damaging these cells. They're very fragile because there's no structure around them. They're just kind of hanging out there, whether they're a supersedure cell, emergency cell, or a swarm cell. They're all they're out there in the element, okay? And it's very easy to just, if you even touch them, you have the possibility of damaging that larva or pupa that's inside of them. So once they're capped, that's when the swarming is imminent. And again, I'll talk about that in greater depth. So when we're looking at the swarm cell, again, make sure whether there's larvae in there or there's not. Worker bees have this propensity to build these swarm cells, and then nothing ever happens. So don't get too excited until you look in there. If you did see some swarm cells in the bottom and you could not identify any larvae in there, well then, wait a week and go back and look again just to make sure. Maybe they just haven't got it, the queen hasn't got around to laying an egg in there. All right, so here's another swarm. Now, when these girls, when this hive swarms, there's a couple choices that they can make. Sometimes, on rare occasions, the scout bees have already gone out. They've already found a new house, and so this swarm is going to go immediately to that house, wherever that house happens to be. More often than not, the swarm is going to exit the hive, and they are going to go to what I call a bivouac area. So it could be a bush, could be a tree, it could be the eave of a house. They're going to go in, they're going to bunch up, and I'll show you some swarms that are bunched up on branches and so forth. And so this whole melee of bees that you see here are then going to cluster, and the queen will be in the middle of that to protect her. We always want to protect the queen, and then scouts will be sent out from that swarm to go find a new home. So you can actually see a swarm box that this guy's put up there in the tree, and that's where these guys happen to go. So swarms typically for our area are likely to happen in late April through maybe even July. It kind of depends upon what your weather is and where you're at. But as was mentioned earlier, you don't want to be doing any splits or anything unless there's drones out there. So one of the checks that the colony makes is, hey, are there drones available? Because if there's no drones, then the girls that are left in the hive, those queen is going to emerge from the swarm cell, but she's not going to be able to be mated because there's no drones. So we do definitely want to make sure they're there. And so when you start seeing those drones and then you start seeing the swarm cells on the bottom of the frame, that's when you want to get a little bit concerned, okay? But there is a second period somewhere in August, September that we can have late swarms. And so you might want to watch for those. Those late swarms are very small and probably not going to last. So what is the pre-swarm behavior? How do we know that our hive is about to swarm? Well, there's some signals. So the honeybees, in order to initiate the departure, they identify the bees performing signals. The honeybees compete or protect the target sites if they know where they're going to be going, and whether they stay or in the hive or they leave really is kind of dependent upon their relatedness to the queen and some other variables. And then of course there's that post-swarm behavior of the waggle dance. If you guys are really excited about learning about swarms and their behavior, you want to go buy in a very expensive book, and that's The Honeybee Democracy by Tom Seeley. He has written an exceptional book on it, but if you don't feel like spending $80, $90 for that book, I don't know what it is today, you can go out and find some videos of some of his talks, and he will describe a lot of this. So let's see if we can do this. So you see this hive box, and these bees have exited the hive, and it's almost like they're bearding. Okay, so they're massing on the outside. But if you look at bearding behavior, the bees are they're not moving when they're bearding. These bees are moving. Okay, they're excited. They're waiting for the rest of the girls to exit, and then there's just going to be this mass melee of bees going each and everywhere. So now we have a really nice swarm here hanging off of a tree that I was able to get. Only about 8 to 25% of the primary swarms actually survive through the first season. I think most of this, whether that number is accurate or not, is dependent upon a couple of factors. One is it's possible that the hive is swarming because they're diseased, they have mites. So I think it was mentioned a little bit earlier, you definitely want to treat these swarms with oxalic acid a couple days after you capture them and before they can start laying some brood. Secondly, you need to really be feeding these guys because they, unless you have some ready frames with honey on them, then they're going to spend an awful lot of energy trying to produce wax and for the frames and do all the kind of things that they need to do. And so they're kind of challenged because they are creating a hive a little bit late. The rest of their group of hives got to start way back in January to prepare themselves. These guys are starting in May or June. So there's some challenges for them, and we need to recognize that, and we need to be a good steward and try to help them out. The swarms that survive the first season seem to do pretty well. So that's either because we're good beekeepers or we were just downright lucky. All right, so there's different types of swarms. There's reproductive swarms. Those are the primary ones. That's where the hive is essentially splitting in half and creating a new colony. There's after swarms. So it's possible that your hive can swarm, and then a very few days later, it will swarm again. Now, the second swarm is going to have a virgin queen. The primary swarm is going to have a mated queen. So the queen that exists in your hive today is the one that's going to leave. And she's going to leave behind some swarm cells. And once they hatch, then that queen needs to go out and get mated and go through that process. And then we have absconding swarms. I don't know about your neck of the woods up there and your group. I hear this word absconding over and over and over, and people aren't using it, in my opinion, correctly. So I'm going to give you information on what an absconding hive is. The reproductive swarms are seasonal. So again, they're going to be about May, June timeframe. You will see some in April. Again, it's all weather dependent. It's going to consist of the old queen and about 50–60% of the original workers that are in there. And then these workers are going to be younger workers that are going to be leaving. The reproductive swarms, once they've left the old nest site, they're going to leave about 12 to 25 queen cells. The reason they're leaving so many queen cells is they don't know which one of those queen cells is going to be viable. And so it's really the one that hatches the first and is strongest. She will either kill the other queens or the workers will kill them. But at the end of the day, we will only have one virgin queen in that hive. And again, that virgin queen then has to go through a series of events. So there's, and these time frames are not absolute. So she's got to go down to the gym and lift some weights and get herself strengthened up. She got to dry out her wings, do all that kind of stuff. And that's about 3 days. Then she leaves the hive and does an orientation flight where she's dialing in her GPS. And then she leaves the hive and goes in search of a drone congregation area, where then she gets mated with 9 to 19 different drones. And if she's really fortunate and gets back to the hive, then the hive starts again. But there are lots of challenges between the moment that she hatches and her coming back as a mated queen. Just know that. The after swarms are fairly uncommon, but they can happen. Many of the queens can occur in and after, and then of course the swarms, the primary, do much better. And this picture that you see here is a hive that's about to swarm. And because it's a still picture, we don't see them as active as they would be, but you can see how many are piling out there because they all can't, we have a small entrance there and they all need to leave almost simultaneously. Okay, so what's an absconding swarm? Well, they are, those absconding swarms are created by the environment within the hive. So there's a low level of food. So there's not enough nectar in the hive, there's not enough pollen, things just aren't going well nutritionally. There may be disease. So maybe mites have overtaken, maybe we have one of the foul broods, maybe we have some other diseases going on that have weakened the hive. There may be insecticide poisoning. It may have been heavily invaded by predators. So you guys talked about yellow jackets, but wax moths can be in there, small hive beetles. It could be skunks. It could be raccoons that have kind of weakened that hive down. And so the hive that's remaining, whether it has a queen or not, says, you know what, I think I'll go find a better house. Okay. So if you're in a crime infested area, you look at the rest of the people living in your house and go, you know what, I think I'll move and that will solve the problem. All right. Tom Seeley, who taught at Cornell University, took his students out to inspect a hive. And they found that the hive was queenless. It was really a small population. And because he had these students, he got them to color code every bee in that hive. We're talking about 20, 30,000 bees that he color coded, one color. And then they waited a couple of weeks, and then they went and they started inspecting other hives on the campus. And I think there's like 1,000 hives on the Cornell campus. And they discovered that these colored bees were in every hive. So that's the problem we have when we have disease, is that they can move that disease, kind of like COVID, to other hives. And that's what we need to be concerned with. Okay, there may be some disturbance, and I talked about this skunks or even beekeepers who do some damage to the hive. And it could be hot weather. I haven't seen that as much. I grew up in El Paso, and with our 115, 120 degree temperature, it didn't seem to bother them at all. But I don't know, maybe the bees today are more modern bees and they're different. So how do we get this? How does this swarm start? So we have a rapid growth in the amount of worker brood. So the queen, for whatever reason, says, hey, I think that we need to make a division here. We need to have a reproduction activity. And so she starts laying prolifically, because we need lots of brood in the hive, because a lot of the hatched workers, the adult workers, are leaving. So we need a workforce to remain behind. There's crowding in the colony. So when you go in and you inspect the colony and you don't see any open cells for the queen to lay, or there's queen cell construction, okay, where we have the swarm cells on the bottom of the frame, and good weather. So we all like to have good weather. I don't know about you guys. It's kind of snowing down here and freezing. You're nodding your head, so you guys are enjoying the same wonderful weather as we are here on the Columbia Gorge. Obviously, right now is not a good time for these hives to be swarming. And anyway, the bees are going to engorge themselves with honey. They're not going to have any nutrition for several days. They have no wax, they have no comb, they have no nutrition. So they have to be able to survive on what they have stored into their belly. And of course, then there's the exodus itself. So if the queen's pheromone gets diluted, then that causes the hive to say, hey, we need to split up. There's a lack of space. So during the nectar flow, down here in my neck of the woods, it's blackberries. Do you guys have blackberry bushes up there? Okay. So when those blackberries come into bloom, blackberries nectar is no better than any other nectar, essentially. What it is important is that the blackberries have an intense amount of flowers. And so those bees can really get in there and start consuming that nectar and bringing it back to the hive. But there's a problem when we have this intense nectar flow. We have the receiver bees that are getting the nectar from the foragers, and we have the queen, and they're all fighting okay, amongst each other, because there's only a certain number of cells that are available. And if you are not staying ahead of the game and providing some empty frames for them to, for the queen to lay, or for them to store that nectar, well, then they're gonna stick their tongues out at you and maybe raise their front leg and make some signs that you're not going to appreciate, and then they're going to leave, okay? So there has to be an abundance of resources. Some bee strains are more apt to swarm than others. Of course, the age of the queen has a factor, and then environmental conditions. So it has to be the right temperature, and there can't be a lot of wind. We have a lot of wind here in the gorge, so it's got to be 3 knots or below. So if you take anything away tonight from any of this, it's recognizing the signs so that you can interrupt that and do something about it. So if you go in to inspect your hive and you see a lot of queen cups, then they're going to be swarming in a week or 2. If you see eggs in the cups, then they're going to be swarming in 8 to 10 days. So again, I want to go back to that life cycle. The queen lays an egg in that swarm cup. And once she lays that egg, that's there for 3 days, and then it hatches into a larva. And then on day 9, it then gets capped. And then an adult queen emerges on day 16. So between day 9 and day 16 is a very short period of time. Once that cell is capped, once that queen cell is capped, then the hive can swarm. They won't swarm before that, they'll swarm once it's capped. If you see the capped cells, well, I've kind of told you that, they're going to be swarming any second, and whatever you do is going to be a little bit late, okay? There are some beekeepers that think, you know, I see these swarm cells, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hive tool or my thumb and forefinger, and I'll just mash every one of these, and that will stop the process. I'll tell you my view of that, it won't work. They'll just build some more and they'll swarm anyway, because the dynamics of why they started to swarm have not been solved. There's not enough cells in there, empty cells for them to either put eggs or stores, food stores into. Something's going on that you need to solve before you do that, okay? So while they're in flight, the worker and the queen pheromones hold the whole thing together. So the queen is essentially in the middle of that mass of bees until they get to that bivouac area. And she stays in that until the scouts can find a new source. So these scouts, just like when they're scouting for foraging materials, be it nectar or pollen or water or propolis, these scouts are sent out and they go looking for a new house. Now, I am going to guess that everybody that's on this Zoom call has gone out and searched for an apartment or a house in their lifetime. And bless your little hearts, it wears me out to look at the first one or the second one or the last one that finally gets chosen, but that's what these bees do. So these bees are looking for the right house, just like we are looking for the right house. And that right house, they're looking for the volume of the entrance. They're looking for the volume of the inside of that hive or that potential hive. And they come back and they do a waggle dance. And their hope is to excite enough of their partners that they will join forces. So there's this democratic voting that goes on in that swarm. And if they excite enough of the workers, then those workers will elect a couple more scouts who will go out to verify, because I know people never lie and bees never lie, but we just better go out and verify what's going on. So they go out, and if they come back with the same information in that waggle dance, they're not only telling you the distance and the direction, but they're telling you the volume of the entrance and of the interior volume of that selected target. So it does seem very chaotic to us, but the fact is that they clearly understand where they're going and what they're going to be doing. Okay. All right. So they do scout out the cavities, communicate that through the waggle dance. There is this colony-wide debate that goes on, and eventually the majority wins. And then they leave again from that bivouac area now to go to their new house. Once they get to their new house, more often than not, it's an empty tree. It's in the eave of your house. There's no wax, there's nothing in there. And so now this group of workers has to go through this cataclysmic kind of activity. They need to build wax. They can't build wax without having nectar. Wax is actually made from the sugar within the nectar. They have to build cells. They have to go out and forage. They have to tend to the babies. The queen can't lay until there's some cells available. So we have all these different things that have to happen. And shockingly enough, somehow it all kind of comes together. And now we have a new colony and a working colony. So it's really kind of amazing how it all happens. So in the old hive now, the ones they've left, now the virgin queen emerges, and she may tolerate another virgin queen for a short period of time, but more often than not, the workers are going to go in and pile up on top, kind of like a football huddle, and they're going to kill the majority of those queens that emerge. Or they will just chew through the queen cell, which effectively kills it, just like our worker bees do when they chew a little hole in the cap of a brood cell. And then, as I said, they have to go through this mating dance. It's about 12 days. And I think it was mentioned that it takes about 30 days total, because even after they're mated, then it takes another 21 days before we have a worker bee emerge. And that's why understanding, memorizing that life cycle is so critical to everything you do in your beekeeping. All right, so you go into your hive and you go, wow, you know, the last time I was in here a couple of weeks ago, it was filled with bees. Now there doesn't seem to be as many bees in there. What's going on? So you look at the brood, and if there's any open brood, then they've probably swarmed within 4 days or less. If there's no open brood whatsoever, then it's been more than 4 or 5 days, because again, there's 9 days there between the egg and when they cap that cell. If there's no brood whatsoever, then they've swarmed greater than 3 weeks, and the new queen is not laying yet. We hope. Or if you see multiple eggs in a cell, then unfortunately she didn't get mated, and now the workers have converted into laying eggs. So that's a laying worker. And the thing that stimulates the laying worker are 2 things. One is the absence of the queen pheromone, and 2 is the absence of the brood pheromone. The brood pheromone is what the larvae are emitting, just like human babies. About every 2 seconds, the larva emits this little pheromone that says, "Feed me." Just like our little babies do. when they start crying, they go, feed me, okay? So if those two things are absent, then the workers' ovaries are able to mature to the point of laying eggs, but of course they don't have any sperm, and so they're not going to be fertilized eggs, and the hive is going to die. All right, so here's a swarm in action. You can see them, piling in to this swarm activity there. So their ability to organize still kind of remains a mystery. There's so many things about the honeybee that we still don't know. I don't know if most of you are aware, but in terms of, well, let me step back. In my young beekeeping time, I seemed to have a lot of anger. And my anger is that we had these entomology departments all around the world, and a lot of them were involved in studying bees, and yet we still had these unanswered questions. Why do these entomologists with these PhDs and all of this experience, why can't they answer my question? Well, the fact is there's so many variables and there's so many things that we still don't know. And I doubt in my lifetime, your lifetime, whoever the youngest person is on this call is going to know all the answers. And in part, that's the exciting part of beekeeping, is you can always find new things. And sometimes you can sort it out for yourself. And sometimes you can just scratch your little head and go, I'll be darned. So 60 minutes prior to their exiting, there's a piping sound. So I don't know if you guys have heard. You guys see the queen there? So again, if you open that hive and you hear that sound, you might start looking for some swarm cells. And then of course the peak is after. The density of the bees is really going to start dropping. The bees' velocity, their movement is going to be increasing. There's going to be a production of buzz runs. So this is kind of interesting. A lot of these bees, the bees, the in-house bees, the ones that have been tending to the babies and all that kind of stuff, before they started foraging, they have not been out. Their wings are not as strong. Their bodies aren't as strong. They didn't go down to the gym like the queen did. Even the queen, all she's done is gone from cell to cell laying eggs. And so they don't have this strength. So one of the mechanisms is that these worker bees do these buzz runs. So the buzz run is essentially a bee going back and forth across the frame. And the purpose to that is to create heat, to warm everybody up, to get them prepared to go out for flight. They start doing waggle dances or shaking signals. So the shaking signal is where one bee literally grabs a hold of the head of another bee and shakes it and says, hey, pay attention. Probably like you do to your kids. All right, a little busy graph here, but essentially it kind of talks about the different triggering signals. The piping rate goes up. Let's see, I can't quite. All right, so depending upon whether it's before, during, or after, these different activities are going on to get us to the actual swarm. So here on the left, I don't know that you can quite see it, but in that tree is a swarm if you look really closely. If you look at the right picture, you'll actually see the swarm. There's a couple things. If you have not gone out and gotten a swarm, this is my time to talk about a little caution. First off, be very diligent that you are safe. So this particular ladder is an orchard ladder that we use here to pick fruit. And so you've got a guy holding that ladder to make sure it's stable. And then you have the actual person, that's actually a woman who lives next door there. And she's suited, she's got her gloves on, and she's ready to get this hive. Our tendency as a new person is to go rushing in there, and we're so excited, and we're kind of thinking, well, gee, the girls are going to leave before I can get up there. If they do, that's fine. There'll be other swarms. Don't kill yourself, okay? There's a guy down in Corvallis, a beekeeper that had been a beekeeper for several years. And he and his wife went out, as I understand it, into a forested area. And there was a swarm somewhat up high, and he was climbing up a rather tall ladder. And on his way down, he kind of slipped. And the box that he had the swarm in then tilted, and the bees, dumped all over him. And they weren't happy that they got dumped all of a sudden. And he got 100 stings or more and went into anaphylactic shock. So don't just, be prepared, okay? Make sure that you have everything. It doesn't matter what size box. I've used cardboard boxes. I've used nuke box cardboard boxes, all kinds of things you can use. If you're really excited about swarms and want to catch one this year, then make sure that you have that stuff in your car, so that when you get the call, you can immediately go there. But take a deep breath, look at where the swarm is, and decide how to get it the best way, right? So there is that high-pitched piping signal. The scouts are burrowing among the quiet bees to get them excited, aggravated. They start pressing their thoraxes together, just like in a swarm, to heat them up. They stimulate the quiet bees to kind of warm them up and get them ready. About 15 minutes prior, then the worker bees appear to be kind of calm. So there's the calm before the storm. And then a few of the workers are running back and forth in that buzz run kind of fashion. And then there are direct contacts with the bees to activate them. And then the swarm begins a few minutes after that. About 10 minutes before, then the piping signal really starts to begin in more intensity. And then there's a lot more buzz running and going on. Here is that shaking signal. See how the bee jumps up on top of the other one and just shakes it? That also happens first thing in the morning when the scouts go out to find the first day foraging area. Those scouts will come back and do that shaking signal. Let's see. And then, of course, there's the waggle dance. So when the scouts do go out from either the bivouac area or from the hive itself to go look at a new location, then they come back and they talk about where that location is via the waggle dance. And I'm not going to get into the intricacies of the waggle dance unless somebody wants to ask a question, and I'll take 20, 30 minutes and discuss it with you. So when are these swarms going to happen? The bees signal to the rest of the group that it's time to leave the home because the conditions are right for them to swarm in terms of the internal hive stuff. There's not enough cells. There's not enough food. There's something going on that stimulates them to swarm. And so they're not going to swarm unless the temperature is above 50 degrees. I think it's probably more close to 60 degrees. The wind has to be less than 3 knots. You don't want these bees out there trying to struggle with high winds. and it's got to be sunny. It can be slightly cloudy, but the sun really needs to be up there. All right. And then I did talk about their house hunting. So the scouts go out, they start looking, and they look. They're looking for a good size to be able to build a new house into. I don't know if you've looked at any trees or maybe where bees have burrowed into your house or something, but their mandible area is one bone structure, and they actually have one tooth, and those teeth are pretty strong. They can actually gnaw wood. So if it's halfway decent, then they'll go ahead and move in, and they can expand the entrance or they can expand the interior. If you have a hive and you want to have a little insurance, then I would take, let's see. Well, I'll get to that. So hives will swarm about 1.2 times per year. They'll swarm from a few feet to yards, about 200 yards away, and usually about 40 feet in height. It could be less, it could be more. So what can you do to prevent the swarming? So first off, like I said, when you lift that second box and you look at the bottom of those frames and you see some swarm cells, not swarm cups, but swarm, or not queen cups, but queen cells that have egg or larva in it, then you want to either add another super, or you want to think about splitting. You can split it into nukes or into a completely new hive. You can shake the nurse bees out in front of a weaker colony, and so the nurse bees are going to be on those brood frames and checkerboarding, and I'll show you a picture of checkerboarding. So, or you can build a swarm trap. So this guy is really adept at carpentry, and so he built this thing and he puts it out every year, and I think he actually catches swarms every year from his own hives. Or you can do splits. Here's the kind of swarm box that I like. It's just a wooden nuke box, and it's got on the back, it's got a piece of plywood with a circular hole in it. I like to put a piece of rope through that hole, and I get the tallest ladder I can, and I climb as high as I can, and I put a weight on one end like a wrench or a hammer, and I throw that rope over the highest branch that I can get to, and I pull it down and pull this nuke box up with it, and then I tie it to the base of the tree, and then I wait. Now, when you're making these swarm boxes, you only want to have at the most one frame and in that box, and you want it all the way to one side. So when the scout bees come and look at this, they're going to see lots of volume. Hopefully you have a frame that has comb on it. That will really be enticing to them. And then you just kind of wait for them to come along. Be safe. I can't tell you that over and over and over. Wear your protective gear, have a ladder, that kind of stuff. So here is me. You guys can critique whether I'm a good swarm catcher or not.
And this is a bit awkward, but we're going to get this right under here, okay? Centered. And we're going to lower this like this. And then we're just, okay. Then we're going to do the next method, which is take it in here.
Smash everybody.
Because we really want to make sure that the queen's in here, okay? And you're going to have some flying around, and that's fine. You're going to take this plug out and set these guys down here and see what happens.
All right.
Okay, so you can snap the branch down. The branch was too low for me to do that, and so that's why I had to kind of pound them in there. What I've done is I've taken this box that I put the bees in, and again, it doesn't have to be a nuke box like this is. It could be any old cardboard box. If you use a regular cardboard box, I tape it up, so that top and bottom are all taped up, and I'll cut a little hole for an entrance down towards the bottom. So I'm going to place this box directly under where the swarm was. And then I'm going to go away for an hour and then I'll come back. And so when I come back, then we should have this right here. Okay. So what's going on here is you'll notice that all the bees, or there's a pile of bees at that entrance.
And
What's
so if they mass back up on this branch, well, then we didn't get the queen.
Right. So if you look at where you
So let's go ahead and
took the
stop
swarm
that.
from, then and there's a lot of bees back on that branch or wherever the swarm was, the likelihood is that you didn't get the queen and she is back up there. On the other hand, if all the bees are marching into this box, then the queen is in there. If you're really concerned, then you can actually lift that lid a little bit and look inside. And if there's a ton of bees in there, then you have her. Do not leave wherever you caught this swarm from and take them home only to discover that you didn't get the queen. So there are some steps to do there. Yep. Okay. So plan on making splits in the spring. I think you guys talked about that earlier. April, early May is a good time to do splits. There does need to be drones available, or you can buy queens. The safest way is to buy a queen because then you don't have any concern about them making a queen and her not getting mated. Only about 60–70% of the queens that go out to get mated actually return back to the hive. So there is that concern. You can reverse the deeps in the spring. You can requeen the hive. You can know what breed your bees are because some are more apt to swarm than others. Do regular spring inspections and look for those swarm cells. Look to see that there's enough space in there. If you're a brand new beekeeper and you buy a nuke from one of the vendors, it's going to be a 4 or 5 frame nuke, and you're going to put it into your hive and you're going to have some empty frames in there. You want to watch those empty frames, and when 80% of the frames that's in that box, whether you have an 8 frame or a 10 frame hive, when it gets to be 80%, you want to add a second box. What happens with new beekeepers is they don't go in there and inspect soon enough, and the bees will actually swarm. I've seen brand new nukes in a single boxed hive swarm like 2 weeks later. They ran out of room. So try to stay on top of that. And then monitor Mother Nature. One of the downfalls of beekeepers is that we're so focused on our beehives, we forget what's going on around us. So is there things out there, for them to snack on? Is there nectar? Is there pollen? We don't actually have to see the nectar or pollen. We can see the flowers. So if you have blackberries in your area, take the opportunity to go wherever they are and see when they go into bloom. That way you'll know the nectar flow is happening. And then, of course, give them some space. So here is checkerboarding. You're going to see that a new frame has been put in between every other frame. And so they've either split this hive by taking out 5 frames and putting it into another box, or they've moved those frames up and checkerboarded it. And usually when you checkerboard, you want to do that in the bottom box where the queen is laying. We're giving the queen an opportunity to have some cells. And so again, these don't have to be frames that have been built out, but if you do have some, that is the best thing of all. But they'll build them out pretty quick if you put them in there. All right, so splits. I'm not going to get too deep in this because we could be talking for an hour on this, but essentially you've got 2 boxes and your choice is to take the 2 boxes and put one to the right and one to the left, and you're done. Okay. Of course, you need a bottom board and you need a top. One of those boxes is going to have a queen and the other one's not. If you see those queen cells, well, then you want to put those in the hive that doesn't have a queen in it. And then you hope that the queen emerges and that she hatches and she mates and does all that kind of stuff. All right. So after the swarm is over, the best thing to do, and not all of us are able to do it, but isolate your hive away from your other hives, especially if the swarm doesn't come from your own hive. You don't know what sort of diseases they have. So it's a good idea to isolate them somewhere, some distance from your other hives. You can wait about a month. And if they look healthy, nothing's going on, then you can reintegrate them into your own apiary. You definitely want to treat for mites. Oxalic acid is a great treatment because there's no brood. You can either vapor them if you're into that, or you can do the oxalic dribble, which is real easy, or you can in fact spray them. You can just mix that up, and there's instructions out on the internet. It's not real hard to do. You do want to definitely leave the swarm alone for at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because again, they have to establish this new hive. And if you start going in there after a week or every day or whatever your anxiety level is, all you're doing is interrupting their opportunity to build up this hive. So after 2 or 3 weeks, you definitely want to inspect for disease. You want to inspect for mites, and you want to make sure that there's brood present. And in nice big red letters, feed, feed, feed. So the real key to hive management is not to be reactive. And that's what most of us beekeepers, unfortunately, are apt to do. We need to be proactive. We need to be treating at opportune times. We need to be grabbing those swarm cells out of the hive and moving them to another hive before they swarm. Otherwise, we're chasing these swarms all over our property. So with that, I think I am done. So I will take all the questions you want. Does that mean nobody's left?
No, we still have 44 people in the room, so hang tight. I know people have questions. We're always such a group full of good questions.
Maybe their brains are just too overwhelmed. I hope that wasn't too fast.
No, it was very informative. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
So in the chat, somebody asked that checkerboarding, doesn't that break up the brood nest?
It is breaking up the brood nest, and you want it to break up the brood nest. And the reason that you're doing that is because there's no empty cells for the queen to lay in. So if you've been beekeeping for 2 or 3 years, surely you've inspected a hive, especially during the nectar flow, where you're looking at that bottom box and you see frames that have lots of nectar interspersed where the brood should be. So if we look at this a little different view, if you looked at a brood frame especially one that's kind of got some sporadic capped brood, you should be able to see some eggs and some larvae in amongst those. And so I say that the queen is backfilling, but during a nectar flow, those stupid receivers seem to think that they are smarter, they're braver, they're whatever than the queen is. And so they are putting nectar where the queen should be laying. And so that's why we're interspersing these frames in there.
And just to
And then
clarify, those
somebody
are
else
frames
asked another
drawn with
question.
wax. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Those are frames drawn with wax, not undrawn frames, right?
Say that again?
If you're trying to make space for the queen to lay eggs, you would give them frames that have wax drawn on them, not just plain foundation undrawn frames.
It would be preferable to have waxed frames, but not every new beekeeper has that opportunity. And so you could actually put frames with foundation on it, and they will build it pretty quickly. But it's not, it would be better to have some that have wax on them.
There's a question that says, would you comment on how to recognize backfilling as a sign of swarming?
Well, I don't know exactly what that means. I guess when I hear the term backfilling, I'm thinking that the queen is now laying eggs where other brood is already hatched. Before the hive swarms, when you look at your brood area, it is expanded. There's going to be a lot more brood in that bottom box and maybe even in the second box. So that's kind of the sign to me that things are moving too rapidly. There's too much nectar out there. There's too much pollen, and the weather has been too delightful for them. And so they have really built up their population. And it may be a lack of cells. It just may be an overwhelming population. So earlier, you had a gentleman talking about his company and how he's going down and inspecting these hives, and he showed the 2 states of weather down in California. When commercial beekeepers transport, they are only transporting 2 boxes per hive. They can't have 3 boxes. They can't have a single box. So when they get down there, their bees are essentially asleep. It's winter up here, especially the ones that come from the Northwest. And when they get down there, and all of a sudden they have this delightful weather, it's sunny, and then they start getting into the almond pollen, which is intense with protein, and these hives just explode with population. And so what those commercial beekeepers do is they skim off the excess bees, and that's how they build nukes and packages and all that stuff. So they're doing that proactively. The hives that we have are swarming because we aren't skimming them off. We're not splitting them. We're not doing something or adding additional frames in. There's no reason you can't have 4 boxes in a hive, but you do need to have some space. So I hope that kind of meandered through what they were thinking about.
Yeah, when I've heard the term backfilling, what I think of is it often happens during a flow when there's lots and lots of nectar coming in, and you'll look at your brood frames where brood has recently emerged, and what you'll find is they're backfilling it with nectar because they've run out of room to put all the food. There's pressure to bring all this food in, and there's nowhere to put it. And that makes the queen so she doesn't have any space to lay. And a couple ways to relieve the pressure on a hive without doing a split is you can remove some of that extra food. If they came through winter with a lot of honey, take that honey off of there. They're going to think they've got lots of stores so that they can take half of that and swarm. You can store it or you can give it to another hive. If they're brooding up really fast, if all of a sudden they've got 4 or 5 full frames of brood where there wasn't much before, pull some of those frames of brood out, the capped ones, and give them to another hive. That's called equalizing your hives. And because the thing that triggers swarming is usually too much brood and too much food for the space that they have. So if you don't have more drawn comb or you can't give them more space, you can take resources away. Is that, Charles, is that kind of what you have heard?
Yeah, I think that's some good advice. And if you're going to pull honey frames, most beekeepers are going to say, hey, I want to extract the honey because that's why I'm doing all of this. It's really a good practice to throw a couple of frames of honey in the freezer or store them somewhere where they're not going to get overtaken by wax moths or something, because you can use them at times when there's not enough stores in there. You can just add those frames back in.
This is Michael. Can I ask a question? Thank you for your talk. I'm a little concerned about swarming and affecting my house or my neighbor's house. Are there any structural aspects to a home or eaves or soffits that seem to attract swarms? Anything that I and my neighbors need to be thoughtful about if a swarm occurs?
You know, the good thing about being married is that there is a female spouse in the house that tells us things. And the woman of the house here has explained to me in great detail about bee holes. So when we're looking at the soffits around our house or any structure on the outside, it's a good thing to go and fill those holes with something, okay? Because bees will find the smallest hole and they will get in there, and then you have a whole different animal to deal with. So yeah, you know, if you're a nice guy, you know, and you're friends with your neighbor, you know, take him by the hand and walk around his house and kind of look at those things and get him to look at your house and do the same. I do a lot of cutouts, and I'm just amazed at how people have just left things. And bees, of course, are going to find them, or yellow jackets, but bees mostly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And adding on, it's really important to do the best that you can to not let your hives swarm. Everybody gets swarms sometimes, but some people believe that it's a natural behavior. We should go ahead and let the bees swarm because that's what they want to do. And it's really, it's irresponsible to the bees and it's irresponsible to your neighbors. So few of those swarms survive. They're going to have a better chance of surviving if you do a split or something else. And if they do swarm and they get into your neighbor's wall, like Kathy and I have done a lot of cutouts, it's really expensive. To take the siding off, you're in there with a saw, cutting open the side of their house. You can't just kill honeybees. You have to open the wall and take them out. So please take Charles's advice and do everything you can to give them room and don't let them swarm.
Yeah, learn the signs that you can preemptively prevent the swarm. And that's, you know, the buildup, that's where they're, during the nectar flow, they're backfilling, or they're filling all the cells up with nectar, or they're swarm cells. Use those swarm cells to your advantage. So when you tilt that box back and you see the swarm cells, then what I say is lay that box on its back, okay, on the short side, and then very gently pull out the frames that have the swarm cells on it. And that's the ones you're going to put into a nuke box or another hive box.
Any other questions? No? Okay, we are at 8:30. I want to thank you all. Well, we missed our beginner lesson, but I think that Charles more than made up with lots of information today. Thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. And thank you, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the apiary this year. Come on out and see us. Oh, go ahead,